Yeah, it's so good to see you all again. Welcome to our dinner and commission service. It's a joy and a privilege to be here. But why are we here? Why do we do this? Why is it that on Friday and Saturday evenings, just after we've had just after we've had our tea and we switch the fire on and settle down in front of the TV to a nice cozy evening, suddenly decide, you know what, I need to get my street pastor uniform on and go out there into the horizontal rain and sleet of a July evening in Edinburgh. But let me read this. This is I read this just a couple of days ago, and this is from Jeremiah chapter 29. And it says this: "Thus says the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, to all the exiles whom I have sent into exile from Jerusalem to Babylon. Build houses and live in them. Plant gardens and eat their produce." And then on to verse 7. "But seek the welfare of the city where I have sent you into exile, and pray to the Lord on its behalf, for in its welfare you will find your welfare." And last year, as we've heard from the Deputy Provost, last full year that we operated, that was 3,000 people that Street Pastor gave some form of practical help to on the streets. That's the church's response to that verse in Jeremiah 29, seek the welfare. And in seeking the welfare, that's what street pastors did on more than 3,000 occasions to people. Let me tell you one occasion that really sticks in my mind. I was out with a team within the last year. We came across the pitiful sight of the two people begging on the street, the man, the woman. It was a cold night, and we gave them the customary hot drink, soup, the blanket, and the lady asked for if we had any gloves. We carry gloves and hats and things in rucksack. Suddenly remembered I hadn't packed any gloves, but my colleague, street pastor, was wearing a really nice pair of probably hand-knitted pink gloves, and with the extra long bit coming up her sleeve, probably selected it especially for that night to keep her warm. And the girl who was begging said, "Do you have gloves?" I said, "I'm really sorry, I don't." So my colleague, street pastor, took her gloves off and gave them to that girl that was begging. And that girl said, "Do you know what? That is the kindest thing anyone has ever done for me." Now, that sums it up. That, to me, is seeking the welfare of the city that you live in. But why do we do it? We're commanded to do it, but there's also the fact that we are motivated by God's love for us. God first loved us. And this is an account that I share many times on the street when I get the chance. I think it sums up God's love for us so clearly. And it's in Luke's Gospel in chapter 15. Let me just briefly remind us of it. Jesus says these words. He said, "There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, 'Father, give me my share of the estate.' So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got all he had together, set off for a distant land, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. After he had spent everything, there was severe famine in the country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. When he came to his senses, he said, 'How many of my father's hired servants have food to spare, and here I am starving to death? I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants." So he got up and went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and, filled with compassion for him, ran to his son, threw his arms around him and kissed him. The son said to him, "Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son." But the father said to his servant, "Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fatted calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found." So they began to celebrate. The story tells us of a son who blew the family fortune on wild living and then came to his senses. In his mind, quite rightly, he recognized that he deserved nothing from his father. He'd already taken what would have been his in years to come, and so planned to earn his way back into the family. Humbling? Yes. But we would probably say quite right, quite fair. He spent the money, he has to pay. You commit the crime, you do the time. We want justice. And Sonny Boy here has good reasons to think that Dad will not be happy. And so he does possibly the hardest thing that we humans can do, eat humble pie. And Dad, sorry I've done wrong, I deserve nothing. But the meeting takes a slightly different turn. Dad sees him first. And at that moment, we see the expression of a parent who has a lost child. Filled with compassion, the father greets him and expresses his unconditional love for his repentant son. Was he the father who demanded justice? No. Was he the dad who waited with a big stick or the big slipper? No. He was the dad who had grieved over the loss of his child for many years, but now the son returns, humbled, repentant, and wanting to restore that relationship with his loving father. In that scene, we can see very clearly the feeling of deep affection that the father has for the son. Of course, in the parable, the father is representing God, and the son is actually us. And the story is a picture Jesus uses to describe God's grace to us. As rebels towards God, we deserve nothing. But in his grace and his mercy, he offers us forgiveness and restores our place in his family. That is the love of the Father. It's perhaps the clearest explanation of God's love for us. So back to the question, why do we love others? Why do we go out on the street as street pastors to do these things? Well, we do these things because he loved us first. And that's it.